Esa enai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Esa enai el heharim me'ayin Yavo Ezri. Esa enai el heharim me'ayin Yavo Ezri. Esa enai el heharim me'ayin Me'im Adonai, Oseh, Shamayim va'aretz, Esa einai, El heharim, me'ayin, Yavo Ezri. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? You know my help, it comes from God who made heaven and earth. Esa einai, El heharim, me'ayin, Yavo
Vetsur hevli, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's nice to be with you here in the sanctuary. It's lovely to join you in your homes for those who are there. And as you can imagine, my heart is very, very full tonight. And it's full of some joy that I'm back here, that we get to welcome another Shabbat into our presence. And my heart is also heavy with the stories I'm going to tell you in a few moments, and with, of course, the tragedy that unfolded last night while I was flying in Tel Aviv. My daughter was on that street a week ago. And that's how it goes. So, as I've often said, life is about holding the heaviness and the joy all at the same time. So I'd like to start with Mary Oliver, poet, and I always like to say liturgist, with this poem, Don't Hesitate, which I think Rana shared with me. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate, give into it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and often not very kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely, you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. So let us begin our Shabbat with joy that's not made to be a crumb, even as our hearts are heavy. Or Zarua. This is on your sheets.
Join me. Bum biddy bum 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 bum again. Bum biddy 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 bum biddy. Namana, 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 or Zarua. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrein lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrein lev simcha. We must keep our hopes alive. We must raise our voices high. We must hold each other tight. We must stand up in the night and be a light. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrein lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrein lev simcha.
I invite you now to turn with us to pages 2 and 3 for the Shabbat candle blessing, and it's an honor to invite Barb Shepard to lead us.
Source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lecha likner Shel Shabbat. When we enter the sanctuary in preparation for Shabbat, the doors in the back of the sanctuary are open. They're open for us to enter, for us to gather as a community. But when we open the doors for Shabbat, and we will do that in just a second, so if I can have somebody close the doors in the back, so that we can open, and Shabbat, our divine bride, can enter with a special spirit, a spirit that is dedicated specifically to the experience of bringing in the Shabbat energy. Please join me on page 20 and 21 with Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala penei Shabbat nikabela Lecha Dodi, likrat kala penei Shabbat nikabela Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom Mevorach, Boi v'Shalom ated ba'ala, Gam besimcha Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.
Please remain standing.
Barechu et Adonai hamevorach. Barechu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai havorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch
page 30. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidbaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah poteach she'arim, uvitvuna meshane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umesader et hakochavim, b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, b'choshech mipnei or, uma'avir yom umevi layla, umavdil ben yom uben layla, Adonai tzvaot shemo, El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. Page 32.
Ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, b'shofbenu v'kumeinu, nasiach bechukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Torotecha, u'v'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed, ki hem chayenu, le'orech yameinu, uvahem negeh yomam v'layla, ve'ahavatcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Baruch Shem kevod malchuto leolam va'ed.
Ve'ata
et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha b'derech u'v'shochbecha u'kumecha u'shartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'chatabtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kedoshim lelohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Adonai Elohechem emet. Please join me responsively on page 39. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way, inspired by prophets and instructed by sages. Time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did on the shore.
Yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai Mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot osefele Nora tehilot osefele Malchutecha ra'uvanecha Bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam Ze'elianu ve'amru Ze'elianu ve'amru Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed Yai lai 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 Yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 V'ne'emar ki vada Adonai et Yaakov ugelo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch ata Adonai Ga'al Yisrael.
Page 42.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha ushmor tzetenu vo'enu Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha ushmor tzetenu Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim Baruch atah Adonai Haporei sukat shalom Aleinu ve'al kol hamo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim Amen.
More than the Jewish people has kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. B'Shamru, page 44.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. La'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת. לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת. לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת.
The tefillah begins on page 46. We're going to all join in the first opening kavanah from Psalms, Adonai Svatai Tiftach, and then continue on silently through what we will do, the Mishaberach and Oseh Shalom. So just go all the way through page 60 on your own and being seated when you feel complete.
Adonai Sifatai Tiftach Ufi Yagi Tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
I invite you to turn to page 253, where we'll join together in a prayer for healing for all of those who are suffering in mind, body, and spirit. Can you hear me now? Can people hear? A little bit more? A little bit more sound, maybe? Maybe I'm just tired. Could that be? All right, here I am. I'm here. I think that might have been it. Okay, I'm renewed. I'm restored. Even before we said Misha Berach. But let's do Misha Berach for everyone. Please join.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
At this time, from our congregational families, we think of Betty Cohen, Amy Cooper, Char DeGrave, Liz Daniel, Elizabeth Draper, Andrew Fisher, Beatrice Fry, Jacob Gluckman, Nita Hicks, Ron Holman, Dick Kelvin, Ivy Kirschenbaum, Chris Kuntz, Stephen Margolis, Jim Rudisil, Deborah Sanders, Randy Scharf, Julie Sherman, Jean Schimmel, Bob Ward, and Billy Wolfson. All of the names lovingly listed in the live stream as well. And if there are names here in the sanctuary to add, I invite you to do so as our gazes meet.
Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Oh, say shalom, bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru amen. Oh, say shalom bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael.
just want to say that while it's coincidental that it's Shabbat Hagadol tonight, the Shabbat when rabbis have the longest they want to preach. It is traditional to go over all of the minutiae of celebrating Passover. I will not be doing that tonight, but I will be going on. I tried to keep it brief, but I felt compelled to tell you as much of the story as I could. So I know that many of you came thinking you were going to hear about the Ukraine, but I didn't go to the Ukraine. I went to Poland. The closest I got to the Ukraine was the Polish border. So tonight you'll hear mostly stories about Polish people who live in a country which has absorbed 1.5 million Ukrainians in 6 weeks. I'm here to tell you stories you won't hear on the news unless you read the article that I was featured in the New York Times. They are heartbreaking and heartwarming stories that illustrate the generosity of the human spirit in the face of utter inhumanity. I've come with their perspectives of what this moment means from people who are making choices about how to show up right now, terrible and heroic choices. Stories of Polish heroes, Jews and non-Jews, who said to me over and over in so many words, "This time we made the right decision." I know I was an emissary for this whole community, but for me personally, this trip to Poland didn't start last Sunday evening. It began in 1990. I was studying at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem at the time and heard that the Berlin Wall was coming down. And my friends and I, we decided we wanted to be witnesses to history. And so we went to Berlin and we hammered out pieces of the Berlin Wall, which you can see right down there on the table. We visited the cemeteries and synagogues in Prague, in what was then known as Czechoslovakia. And then we met up with a tour that had only run twice ever, but still runs to this day, almost 30 years later, the March of the Living, which is an annual trip sponsored by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Federations of North America, who take youth to see all of the death camps in Poland, where Jewish life was destroyed, followed by a tour of Israel, where Jewish life has been revived. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, as you know, all of the countries in Eastern Europe were free to move away from the communist governments that had overtook them after the fascist regimes fell in the wake of World War II. The Soviet Union would dissolve a year later, and Jews, who were considered dissidents for wanting to leave and practice their Judaism freely, would flee en masse to Israel and to America. And this part of the world wasn't foreign to me because, after all, a decade earlier, in 1980, I celebrated my bat mitzvah with a Soviet refusenik twin, her empty chair on the bima, as I was called to the Torah when she couldn't be. I wrote letters to Marina Levine for years, never to hear back. When we got to Eastern Europe in the spring of 1990, we found in East Berlin, a Prague, and a Poland that were destitute, gray places. As a college kid, I didn't have more than a few dollars to tour the countries. We had to change to their currencies, but it was impossible to spend their money. There was nothing to buy. There were no hotels. Tourists were met at train stations and taken in by private homeowners looking to make a few bucks. It was nuts. It was nuts. And as hard as I tried, I'm sorry that I couldn't find any pictures. But I've brought those pieces that I hammered out of the wall myself. My travel partners and I then joined the March of the Living tour, and besides the horrors that I witnessed the remnants of, I was only partially aware of the agenda of the tour. I knew that I didn't buy into the message that the only place Jews could ever be safe was Israel, But I didn't really grasp how incomplete the story was about the Polish people. That I was told that they were primed with their pitchforks to collaborate with the Nazis. There were experiences also that confirmed the profound enmity of Poles to Jews. We were stared down and spit on as we walked from Auschwitz to Birkenau to hear Elie Wiesel speak to the thousands of us about what it meant that we were all standing there with him on his first trip to Poland since the war. And nowhere in the official governmental museum tour of Auschwitz did the placards mention that Jews were the targets of Hitler's final solution. I knew, like all of you, that Germans were war criminals, and my parents would never buy a German car. But after I left Poland from the March of the Living, I also felt incredibly betrayed by the Polish people and vowed that I would never go back to that horrible place. After all, what I learned also was that most of the Jews who survived the war chose to leave their homes in Poland behind too. It was a land full of blood and ghosts, and no one wanted them there anyway. When I landed, finally after 28 hours of traveling, a missed connection, an additional layover in Munich to add, the irony was not lost on me, I got into the cleanest cab I've ever seen. It was midnight. Between the airport and the hotel, my breath was taken away several times as we passed street signs pointing both to Krakow and to Auschwitz, which is the Polish town name where the most infamous death camp for Jews is located. I had forgotten that Krakow was in the backyard of Auschwitz. I would learn later that our mission coordinator, Sebastian, a non-Jew who is the right hand of the executive director of the Krakow JCC, grew up 20 minutes from Auschwitz, but more about him later. There's actually a picture of him. There's also a picture next of the reception desk at the hotel. Check out the clocks behind the receptionist. The next slide is from my hotel window. What I didn't know that I was looking at was the playground of the JCC. And the next slide is a better picture of the playground with children in it the next day. So after the best night of sleep that I would get all week, I went the next morning to the JCC, which was just around the corner from the hotel. It was 9 a.m. and the people were already lining up to go in. So that's the sign of the JCC building. And the next slide is a welcome sign written in Ukrainian so that people knew that they could come in and be served. These are people standing in line to be served. And just that day, pallets of relief supplies that arrived that morning were there to be unpacked. And this is the painting of a parking spot, which was covered up with pallets. This was later on, but covered up with pallets and covered up with bags of supplies that would come in over the course of the couple of days that I was there. Beautiful, colorful, welcoming. The first displaced Ukrainian person that I met was a woman who could speak some English, and she was in Krakow with her daughter-in-law. Her husband and son, like many, were back in Ukraine, obligated to fight in the war, because no men between 18 and 60 are legally allowed of Ukraine. I learned from her that her daughter-in-law, Victoria, got a job working in a nail salon at the mall, which was just a 20-minute walk away. And so I promised to find Victoria and treat myself. I had planned anyway to spend a couple of hours walking through the old town of Krakow to mentally prepare myself for what was coming up in the trip and waiting for the rest of the group, which I knew would be heavy. So here's what I saw. This is a street in the old town, the main the main street in the Old Town thoroughfare of Krakow. This is a beautiful old church, a pastry shop that's colorful and beautiful. Even there, you can get a Starbucks coffee. And then there's a couple of videos that are coming up next, which were just astounding. The first is the town square, but just listen to the music in the background. I believe it's the Ukrainian national anthem. And this is the town square. I wasn't there, Kevin wasn't there to remind me to take my pictures in landscape. And this is what was happening when I followed the sound of the music.
In your cities, in your countries, in your governments, please say together, all people of all world, NATO close the sky. NATO close the sky doesn't mean close the sky only over Ukraine, sovereign countries. NATO close the sky! NATO close the sky! NATO close the sky! NATO close the sky! NATO close the sky!
Those group of people were demonstrating, and they, after that, they chanted, NATO close the sky, walking to the American embassy. So the reason everything looks the way it does in Krakow is because in World War II, the Germans decided that Krakow was actually a German city. And so it and all of its beautiful buildings, including 7 synagogues, were preserved. Of course, the synagogues were not able to be synagogues. They were used as stables and warehouses for the German war machine. And we'll get to pictures of Warsaw, which is a very different story. And the next slide is the synagogue next to the JCC, which is just a museum. Not knowing any of the politics that I would learn later about, and if you want to know about those politics, I'm not going to share that story, but if you're curious, you can ask me later. I did wander inside the vestibule of this synagogue and saw there was an admission fee to get in. And at that moment in time, that really raised my blood pressure about someone profiting from me seeing my own heritage. And that feeling was magnified also by these 2 images. And this was what I saw on the main thoroughfare of the Old Town. See what the tourist sites are? Auschwitz and the salt mines. And the next is a picture of the map that you can find. You know the maps you get at hotels? Well, the top little square is the tour of Auschwitz. So on the one hand, it's creepy, and on the other hand, they're remembering. So I did find Victoria in the mall, which was filled with stores like Guess and H&M and Samsonite, and also some European stores. She didn't speak English, and she didn't have time to do my nails. But my prayer was that when she spoke to her mother-in-law later on, after work, about this strange American visitor who wanted to hug her, that a connection maybe was made. So I took the scenic route back to the JCC, which is the next pictures of wooded walkway alongside the Old Town of Krakow. And like all places, it had a pigeon lady. And then there was graffiti on the, and if you can't see, it says, "Glory to Ukraine, glory to Ukraine." So when I returned to the JCC, I found another large line of people waiting outside the gate. And that's when I first met the executive director and superhero, Jonathan Ornstein, who's not a rabbi, but lots of people think he is because of what he does. I would learn that he was from New York, but a graduate of Chapel Hill. Go Tar Heels. Sorry, they didn't, yeah, whatever. He had made Aliyah, he fought in the IDF, and then he moved to Krakow to revive the JCC there. When I first encountered him, he was complaining to Sebastian that people were lining up and that it was crowded and they were waiting. And upon later reflection, it wasn't just that he was admonishing his staff. His vision for the experience that he wanted for these people was that they feel dignity. And people lining up in lines to receive handouts didn't feel very dignified. So these are some people that I saw. They're all mothers and children. Mothers and children. This is a beautiful boy with his mother. This is a woman. The next slide is a woman with 2 children. Beautiful. And here's a short video of Jonathan telling us what they're doing at the JCC.
On the border, supplies going into Ukraine different ways. But this is what's going on in our building. You have 7 days a week people are coming in, taking whatever they need for free. That's
7 days a
food,
week.
Medicine, toiletries, sanitary items, and then we ask what else they need, how we can help them. And if they need housing, we're providing them with housing. Whatever we can do for them, we're trying to do.
Were you?
Shortly afterwards, the rest of my group would arrive with a van full of supplies. And so you can see in the next slide, the van looks like the van that we filled. Same. This was from a congregation from New Jersey, and we were unloading bags and bags of supplies. And this last photo is of a bag, which was one of 3, that was full of quick clot bandages, which somebody had donated. So in our group briefing with Jonathan, we learned that the government is not doing any of the direct relief efforts, the Polish government, but they have done what is the most important thing, which is to open the borders to the Ukrainians. So all of the services, anybody who people are meeting, anything that people are receiving is from the kindness of people working with NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And so as you heard, the JCC is providing a lot of those: clothing, food, diapers. They're housing 210 to 230 people in hotels around the city of Krakow every night. They provide childcare. There's actually a few Ukrainian children who they have room for in their own preschool at the JCC. And they have set up childcares in other parts of the city. They're looking now, actually probably with our donations, to open up an after-school program for Ukrainian teenagers who are too young to have been fighting but have nothing to do after school, to set up a club for them. Before the war in Ukraine, I want to tell you a little bit about the JCC. It had 30 full-time staff. It's the biggest Jewish organization in Poland. And prior to 6 weeks ago, it was an amazing, vibrant JCC with, as I mentioned, a preschool, with Shabbat dinners for hundreds, a rabbi who comes every 2 weeks to teach Tanakh and Hebrew. We didn't see it, but there's also an off-site facility that the JCC uses to run the largest Hebrew language program in Poland, which teaches about 300 people, mostly non-Jewish people who are just interested in learning Hebrew. But currently it's being used for Ukrainian moms to learn to speak Polish and English, and also as a daycare center. In regular times, in addition to 30 full-time staff, they have 70 non-Jewish volunteers who just like to hang with the Jews. They do a 6-day-a-week Holocaust survivor club, 50 child Holocaust survivors. And because of COVID, they had to move them off-site because they can't mix with the Ukrainians, who only 20% of them are vaccinated. Since the war, they've hired 15 extra staff, translators, case managers. They're looking to hire a director to direct the whole effort, as 200,000 Ukrainians are now in Krakow, which is only a city of 800,000. The moral of the story for Jonathan is that life and Jewish life and values are thriving in Poland. And they're also proud that they are helping everybody and doing it with dignity. So this is a picture of the JCC preschool with some kids. It's the first one in Poland since World War II. It was opened 5 years ago. This is a supply room set up like Target. People get to choose what they need and what they want, and there's no checkout at the end. They just get to go home with their goods, not somebody doling out little bits and pieces to them. That's part of the dignity. The hotels that they are housing people are not the Red Roof Inn, like we do in Asheville for our homeless. These are 4-star hotels that any of us would think were luxurious. So when we asked Jonathan to describe what the non-Jewish Ukrainians think about going to get help from a JCC, he told us this story. It was about a non-Jewish woman named Anna who came to the JCC with her 2 kids. The war started on a Thursday. She was there Friday at Shabbat dinner. They helped her in the first few days. She stuck around. She met people. And then Anna told them that she had called her grandmother back in Kyiv, that the JCC was helping her, and her grandmother told her something that she didn't know, which was that her grandmother had helped Jews. In 1941. And so, of course, the Jews would help her. After our briefing, Jonathan introduced us to one of his partners in Krakow, who was aiding Ukrainians. His name was Karo, a young non-Jewish Polish guy who earned his master's degree at the University of Rochester. And he just mentioned that as cold as growing up in Poland was, it was nothing like Rochester, New York. He runs a relief agency for Ukrainians in what was a theater 6 weeks ago. A famous actor named Slavatsky, who's also chairman of the theater, gave them permission to use that theater in that way. They have housed over 3,000 people arriving in the train station in Krakow since the beginning of the war. And Jonathan was able to partner with him so quickly when the Ukrainian crisis happened, because he knew already from last summer's refugee crisis, which I had no idea about, maybe some of you who are well-read did, but there were asylum seekers on the border with Belarus who were coming from Syria and Yemen and Afghanistan and Kurdistan and other Arab nations, people of color. And Poland shut their borders to them. They chanted, "Build a wall." Who did they get that from? So while some Poles took up that slogan, Karo went to the border with other people who were sympathizers to help these desperate humans. And it was illegal, and they were arrested, but they were able to set up a soup kitchen in the center of Krakow to help some of these people. So now, having partnered with the JCC in that effort, they were able to lift off this Center for Refugees again, coordinating with the Transportation Department. They have 25 Ukrainian translators. 76 people can sleep in this theater until they can figure out where they're going. And the JCC is a financial partner because they have that expertise and they can direct Ukrainians to the resources that they need. And currently, the JCC is looking to partner with Karo's organization to secure an unused dorm room at one of the universities to house displaced people. And the JCC also helps fund a staff of 17 there to man a call center to match people with apartments in hotels and hostels. And he said that the biggest challenge was people with special needs. So this is a picture of Karo. Is that a picture of him? Where are you? Is that him? Oh, there he is, yeah. And this is a picture of the sign, and you can see at the bottom maybe that the JCC logo is there. And there's also a Muslim partner in there too, so this is a beautiful interfaith effort. An interfaith effort in Poland. Just sit with that for a minute. These are the beds that people stay in. Oh no, this is the operations with people answering phones to house people and connect them with services. The next slide is the beds. And the next slide, I couldn't take pictures inside, but this was a hotel that was housing Roma people. So we walked to this hotel, and they are providing 120 beds to Roma people who can stay in 2-week increments there. And this is a really emerging and desperate piece of this story that you won't hear about either, because they're hated in Ukraine and they're hated in Poland. They're not educated culturally. They live in wagons. They don't have documents. They are the most disadvantaged people, and now they're displaced as well. The people that we met were in their 5th hostel, and they told us that men go to the front lines first because it's just racist there. And nevertheless, as squalid as we might see their lives in the Ukraine might be, they just want to go back home. Next, we went to the train station, which is where people arrive from the border. They get transport and they arrive in Krakow from the train station. And at first, it was full of thousands of people. It's slowed down significantly now, so there wasn't much to see, but I'll show you a picture of the train station. The next slide is adjacent to the train station is a former train station, an old one from the 19th century, and the Polish Scouts are running an operation there to help people with food and places to sleep, medical. The JCC is also listed on their banner as a partner. So the JCC is all over the city of Krakow, publicly helping. This is a picture of Girl Scouts. Aren't they adorable? No cookies. But they did have a beautiful drawing that was just a warm welcome and loving. That night we had dinner in Kazimierz, which is the Jewish quarter of Krakow, and it also houses the synagogue. This is the synagogue and resting place of Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who is also known as the Ramah, and he is, if you're Ashkenazic, you have followed his traditions because he was a major shaper of Ashkenazic Jewish tradition. This is an Israeli-style restaurant in a square that has a Jewish cultural festival that sounded a lot like Hard Locks. Seriously, a lot like Hard Locks. So at the dinner that night, and this is still the first day. Can you imagine this? The first day. I've just got through the first day. There's 2 more days, so hang on. At dinner, Jonathan told us a very sweet story about the Shoah survivors that are in that club I was telling you about. And as you can imagine, because time has gone on, most of these people were children when the war was ended, who were somehow sheltered and decided to stay. And one day, they're in a room, to the left of the door, and they see the supplies room that I told you was like Target, except without a checkout. And they're in their club room, and they can look over and they can see the women and children coming in, the women and the children coming in. And one little old lady raises her hand and says, "I think we should donate our yearly dues to help those people, because someone hid and helped us, and that's why we're here today." And everybody raised their hand. People from the Shoah. I told you I'd tell you a little bit more about Sebastian, who was the first slide. And I told you that he grew up, maybe I didn't tell you, he grew up 20 minutes from Auschwitz, which was like, I'd always wanted to ask somebody, how could you grow up so close to Auschwitz? So I asked him what it was like. And he said it was, it's people's homes. They've been there for generations, so it's home. And they also know what happened there. And they hold both. And then he added something which made me just lose my mind. He said that he grew up as a typical Polish person, and his mom made him blintzes and latkes. And then when he started to work at the JCC, he realized there's no such thing as Poland without Jewish culture. I always think of Jews being the ones who have to assimilate into other people's culture, wherever they live, as a means of survival. But what Sebastian was saying was the opposite. He feels very much that Jews were the creators, the influencers of Polish culture. So the next day is the day we went to the border, and we were escorted that day, not by Sebastian or Jonathan, but by Rabbi Avi Baumol. And Jonathan didn't come with us because he was securing a castle that somebody had arranged with like a 50-room castle, literally a castle. He was signing the papers to make it a refugee housing center. Unbelievable. So Rabbi Avi Baumol is the Krakow JCC rabbi. He lives in Efrat, which is a settlement in Israel for 2 weeks, and then he comes and works at the JCC for 2 weeks. He's a 29th generation rabbi, modern Orthodox, 5 children. And we picked up his dear friend Eric, who was also our guide that day, an evangelical Christian man. And theirs is a story of a unique and unlikely relationship, and how that's been the secret sauce of some amazing partnerships that are doing amazing work. Eric has been studying Bible with Rabbi Baumol for years in his home every Monday night. He's also been working with Jews from Ukraine, in the Ukraine, for years. And because of the relationship between Eric and Avi, the Krakow JCC got involved in his organization. You can see the vest we had to wear with, I can't say the name because it's not my alphabet, but you can see the vest, the bright yellow vest, helper vest, and that's his organization. And the Krakow JCC is now partners with them, bringing supplies over the border. They've rescued 20,000 refugees single-handedly over the past month, in part because Eric's brother knows people on the border control and can bypass checkpoints and lines and get the supplies right into the Ukraine. And Eric also is an interesting story. He and his wife never knew, and this is probably why we never saw anything on the placards in Auschwitz that said that Jews died there, because nobody knew that Jews died there. It wasn't the party line. They learned in school that the Germans murdered and oppressed Poles. It was communist propaganda. In her horror, when she learned it, Eric's wife started to work to support Jews. It was his wife who brought Eric into the work, working with Ukrainian Jews through this Christian organization to help return Jews and resettle them in Odessa and beyond. In 1994, he went to the Ukraine for the first time, Eric did, and the people just touched his heart. They were humorous, dignified, but poor, and he wanted to restore their lives. So he started to work with this international organization working with Jews in Georgia and Belarus and Ukraine. So the next slides are a whole bunch from that day on the border with the Ukraine in a place called Przemysl. I don't know how to say it. It's got one vowel in it, literally. Przemysl. I dare you. There was both the border crossing and a few miles in a processing center where people with no plans go. This was one of the smaller Polish border crossings, and the situation and the traffic changes day by day. So here we go with with a video. This video is of the first thing that refugees see when they cross the border. Did you see the Israeli flag? It's the first thing. That's from Hatzala Lelo Gvulot, Rescuers Without Borders. They're named Rescuers Without Borders because as a little stick to Doctors Without Borders, which is not nice to Israel. So there are more slides of Israelis, an unusual number of Israeli organizations, not just helping Jews, but being Jews in the world. This is a picture of the World Central Kitchen doing amazing work to feed people. We saw them in multiple places. These are some other NGOs. I think there's a picture of, yeah, this is the one where they're playing guitar. There were about 50 tents worth of NGOs. This was a tent just for dogs and cats supplies. Lots of animals. The next one is my favorite dog that I met at the vet tent at the processing center. And this is a picture of the actual border fence. So what we saw next in this video was something that neither Eric or Rabbi Avi had seen, which was people going back into Ukraine with suitcases full of things. Take a look.
Returning to the Ukraine? How come you didn't bring Tina on your trip?
Just hoping that they would be safe along the way, but giving relief to the people back home. This is a picture of me and Eric, special, special man. And the next thing is a picture of Rabbi Avi with a couple that Eric arranged for us to meet at the border and take in our bus with us to Krakow, and to deliver them to a hotel to rest and figure out how they would wait out the war. Their names were Irina and Anatoly. And the Ukrainian military had told them to leave because the civilians were getting in the way of their military operations, and they didn't want to go because they have a son that they had to leave behind. They were anxious about him. Irina was a librarian, and Anatoly, a high-level bee researcher, and all he wanted to know and do was to tell us about his bee research and smile. It was outrageous. He never stopped smiling. Her face was filled with trauma and exhaustion of sitting in her cellar for weeks on end. Cellar, not a bomb shelter, trying to wait out the bombings. This is a picture of the processing center, which I couldn't take any pictures inside of it. And another with Rabbi Tina Grimberg from Toronto, who fled Kiev as a teenager, and she could speak both Russian and Ukrainian with everyone, and so she oftentimes translated what they were trying to say to us. So as I said, we couldn't take pictures inside the processing center, but this was a strip mall, a former strip mall, full of people sleeping in a part of the strip mall which was like a Walmart that they had emptied out and filled with hundreds of beds. And people only are staying like about 24 hours, so people are just moving through. There was a young woman who was heading the whole center from near Lithuania, who had left 2 babies at home to do this relief work, 2 babies with her husband. I can only explain it this way, and it's pretty profound, that if you've ever been to the Humane Society or to Brother Wolf, and you hear the anxiousness of the dogs barking and not understanding what's happening to them, and the edginess, that was what it was like on a human scale to be in that facility. But they were doing amazing work, and they had these offshoots of all these rooms where people, after they had figured out where they wanted to go, and they have choices, and they can change their mind, and they can, they're not being just sent somewhere willy-nilly. People are given a listing of all the things that they can find in each individual country, and then they find their way to a waiting room, and they call a bus, and they say, all the people from Germany, you're going now. Everybody was wearing coats and had their bags packed, like with one foot out the door. So when we got back from the border, which was a long ride, we processed the day and said our goodbyes to Jonathan and Sebastian and Rabbi Baumel and the Krakow JCC. So I'll just show you a few pictures. This is the special JCC swag. As you can see, the pins have the colors of the Ukrainian flag. This is the picture of the rabbis and lay leaders who were on the mission with me. I'm the one with the big bun on my head. And Jonathan and Rabbi Baumel are in there. This is the same group, but you can see a little bit better what the JCC facility looks like. We're now on the last day. It was a 2.5-hour speed train to Warsaw. And we learned that after the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, there was another massacre of young Polish people, 200,000 young Polish people, when the Russians came and liberated Poland. And everything in the city was destroyed, so everything is rebuilt. There are a few remnants of what it looked like when I was there, because in the 1990s, as I said, the fall of the Iron Curtain, the things had changed. And that's when the real stories of the Shoah began to be told. And the people who chose to stay in Poland, who had Jewish roots, began to feel that they could step forward and declare their Jewish identity or tell their children of their Jewish identity. And that's a story that's unfolding on a day-to-day basis. Nobody can say how many Jews there are in Poland, because there's always someone who's discovering from their grandmother or their grandfather or doing family trees that they had Jewish lineage. And there we met with the chief rabbi of Poland, Rabbi Shudrik of the Nozij Synagogue, which actually is original. He is both a Jewish Theological Seminary and Yeshiva University graduate, which is interesting. Only 10%, he told us, these are things he told us, 10% of Polish Jews who survived the war stayed in Poland. And so, again, it's hard to put actual numbers on how many are there. In fact, he told us something very interesting, that 90% of the people who tried to return to their homes after the war experienced some kind of violence from Polish people or knew somebody who did. And I had learned that a long time ago. But Rabbi Shudrik said that the truth is that it was perpetrated by less than 1% of Polish people. It's a totally different impression. So when Poland was taken over by the communists, people gave up or hid their Jewish identities, and so now it's about people discovering. Rabbi Shudrik was clear that we can't compare what happened in Poland to Jews to the other countries in Europe, because Poland was just simply occupied by Germany, meaning the Polish government was completely dissolved. They were not collaborators. There was no agency for them to choose to go along or choose not to go along. Unlike the other countries in Europe, whose governmental infrastructures did collaborate. Gives you a different picture of France and other countries. In Poland, only the local police helped. There were righteous and there were collaborators, he said, but the distinction is that they made those choices as individuals. Someone once said that 5% of Dutch resisted the Germans and 5% of them collaborated and 90% of them were quiet. And Rabbi Shudrik said that the same is probably true in Poland. And his experience is that most people are followers, so that now, when people are saying we need to take these displaced Ukrainians in, and people are doing it, it becomes the thing to do. And he also said, at the same time, the Polish people in Poland are flabbergasted that they're being so good. So Jewish life today in Warsaw, there are many options: traditional, progressive, the progressives that broke off from the progressives, Orthodox, Chabad. People have options, which suggests that Jewish life there is vibrant, just like it is here. When the war in Ukraine broke out, Rabbi Shudrik organized and unified the whole Jewish community, which, sometimes it takes a war to unite some of us into one. They also made a conscious decision to send a van to the border, with an RV camper with the word chesed on it, which means kindness, because the Ukrainians know that word. They know that word. And so they see it and be clear who it is that was offering, and they knew that Jew or non-Jew, they would be willing to help. So his experience is that, and this is true, even in Krakow, that there are three kinds of people who are coming through. Those who, this is unique to Warsaw because they're headquarters for people wanting to make Aliyah, Jews who are wanting to make Aliyah, and the Jewish agency takes care of them. I'll get to pictures of them. Another group is, and the people making Aliyah, that's the easiest group. There's another group that's fleeing but has a place to go. They have a relative in, the Netherlands or somewhere, or in Italy, and they're able to get there. So their stay in Warsaw might just be a week or 10 days. But the third group, which is has the greatest trauma, they are displaced. They still have one foot in the door of Ukraine because they probably left somebody behind there and had to make a very difficult choice. It used to be that you could bribe the police with $2,000 to get your husband between 18 and 60 out of the Ukraine. But now he heard that price has gone up to $20,000, which is a lot considering that for 4 nights hotel, I paid $250. So just relative money. He heard so many stories of the calculus that people are having to face should they split up the family. Is it safer to stay in my basement or to go on some route that might be bombed to get to safety? And then if they got to safety, what then after that? So on the day we were there, the rabbi was in a rush with us because he was on his way to perform a bat mitzvah of a displaced young woman who was supposed to celebrate her bat mitzvah this month and obviously had to pack up and leave her home. In Warsaw, they were housing about 300 people on a daily basis in facilities owned by the Jewish community. 50 to 100 were given home hospitality from people in Rabbi Shudrick's congregation, and 200 people were at the Hilton, which was paid for with donations from the Jewish community. And the Ukrainian crisis has, as I mentioned before, had an impact on the unity of the Jewish community of Warsaw. For the first time, Rabbi Shudrick was able to get 3 of the 4 streams of Judaism together under one roof for seders, community seders. So at the Focus Hotel, there will be 3 large rooms where somebody can choose from a progressive, a conservative, and Orthodox seder and wander in and out of all of them freely. And he found a way to an app which is called Telegram, which is like WhatsApp or these other kinds of things, that sends messages and has a group of 600 Ukrainian Jews who have left, and they will be invited too. About 4,000 or 5,000 Jews have made Aliyah through Warsaw, through the Jewish Agency, as I mentioned, because it's headquartered there in Warsaw. And it's one of 5 headquarters along all of the borders of Ukraine and the different countries there. And right now, Rabbi Shudrick is just trying to be nimble because he believes that we haven't even taken into account those who might want to leave Russia. In fact, he said there were more Russian Jews trying to make Aliyah at the beginning of the war than Ukrainians. So at the Focus Hotel, that's where the Jewish Agency is matriculating Jewish and non-Jewish refugees who want to go to Israel. They're working with the Prime Minister's office, helping decide who is being taken in on a tourist visa and who can make Aliyah. They have to fill out a 32-page form. And there's an interesting thing because, we have a law of return. So you have to prove, you have at least one Jewish grandparent in your, and they've set up like on Ancestry.com, the Israeli government has family trees. And so if you can prove that you're one on an established database of family trees, you don't have to have all the documents. You just need to know that the one person, and then they have the rest. It's quite astounding. We also learned there at the Jewish Agency that Israel is taking in people who are named and have cards that say they were righteous among the nations during the Shoah. And so those people have the right of return to Israel as well. And there was one that they knew of that came from Kharkiv. And they picked her up, and they took her to Warsaw, and she has made Aliyah. So these are my last slides. This is downtown Warsaw, very metropolitan place, as I mentioned, rebuilt in the 1990s. This is from the elevator at the Westin Hotel where I stayed for $60 a night. This is a housing project from the communist days. And you'll be disturbed to know that they hired American architects of what we would call ghettos, like Cabrini Green in Chicago, and those kinds of places to build that during the communist regimes out of cinder blocks, uninsulated. And you were lucky to be able to live in one of those at that time. This is Harry Potter in Warsaw. This is an interesting police barrier with a symbol that says, ahead there's a synagogue. And that was pointing to Rabbi Shudrick's synagogue, the Nozij synagogue, which was established in 1900, the only pre-war synagogue, I believe, that exists in Warsaw. This is the side of the synagogue, just to get a perspective. And this is the doorway of the synagogue, which Jenny Mercer is flying the Ukrainian flag. This is the arc of that beautiful synagogue. And here's a view from the women's gallery down into the belly of the synagogue. And Rabbi Shudrick made mention to me that you don't have to go upstairs if you're a woman anymore because he's established a mechitza on the ground floor for women. This is Rabbi Shudrick. Whoop. That's him. And this is the headquarters of the Jewish Agency at the Focus Hotel. We couldn't take any other pictures there because they're Israelis and they're very uptight. These are pictures of the donation areas in hotel rooms that people can come and take things. They only take new clothes. Everything has a tag on it. Again, it's another way of making it with dignity. More diapers and wipes, and it's crazy. Yeah, I think that's, so I'll just, I just have one last thing to say, which is that I left here hating that I had to go to Poland. But I was thinking of a very different Poland, a Poland of yesteryear. And I just feel so privileged and inspired and opened and changed forever about how I feel about humanity by the people I met. And if you ever feel like that's too big for us, we could never get behind something of such magnitude, I saw it with my own eyes. I saw it with my own eyes. An enormous unity of purpose, and it healed me. And it has, as I said, transformed me. So here's just some credits at the end that I want you to know. That's not to say to stop giving. It'll all go to what you heard about. So we have one really so important and beautiful thing, which is like icing on the cake. And that is that before this whole thing was planned, tonight we had planned to celebrate with Bob Warner, who has chosen to become part of the Jewish people. And when I told Bob that this big thing was going on, and with a little concern in my heart that he would feel overshadowed, it was not for him an overshadowing at all, and to him it made total sense, because the Hebrew name that he chose was after the Piazetzner Rebbe, who preached in the Warsaw Ghetto, who perished in the Warsaw Ghetto, but who gave inspiration to many Jews who are suffering. And that is part of him and his journey, and he said it was the perfect evening for him to celebrate his coming into the Jewish people. He's already done the fun stuff, so this is more fun stuff, which will be followed by a joyous oneg in his honor. Thank you so much, Wendy and Saul, for putting that together. And I'd like to invite you to rise as I call Bob to the bima. I'm sorry, Gaia, it was a little longer than 45 minutes, but I hope it was worth it. Did you get the spirit of it, people? Seriously, do you feel like you went along a little? I tried really hard. Okay, I'm going to open the ark. Would you feel comfortable saying the Shema in a minute? Okay, I have it in my book if you want to look at it. Our God and God of our ancestors, you called Abraham and Sarah to make your sovereignty known to all of humanity. You summoned Moses to teach Torah, thus bringing all humanity, both near and far, close to you. We now ask that you grant blessings to Bob, who stands before the ark of your Torah. He stands before your ark as the people of Israel stood at Mount Sinai, choosing to accept you and the mitzvot of your Torah with love. May Bob now live as a true and righteous member of our people Israel, embracing the heritage of our past, sharing both the burdens and the joys of our present, and anticipating the glory of our redemption. Adonai, God of Israel, spread over Bob the shelter of your peace. Grant him the treasures of your blessings in a life of Torah and a life filled with good deeds, ma'asim tovim. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
In casting his destiny with the destiny of the Jewish people, he has chosen the Hebrew name, Kalman ben Avraham Avinu v'Sara Imenu. With this name, you shall be linked with the whole Jewish people, wherever you are during this lifetime and beyond. May this name bring respect to you and honor to the Jewish people. And I'm going to give you the Torah. You didn't know all the pieces. Just makes it a little easier without the ground. Actually, you take it. I can't pick it up. Just hold it on your shoulder, yeah. Have you chosen to enter the covenant between the God and the Jewish people and to become a Jew of your own free will?
Yes.
And have you accepted Judaism to the exclusion of all other faiths and practices?
Yes.
Do you pledge your loyalty to the Jewish people under all circumstances?
Yes.
Do you promise to establish in your home Jewish spaces and to participate actively in the life of the synagogue and our Jewish community?
Yes.
Do you commit yourself to the continued pursuit of Torah and Jewish knowledge?
Yes. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
I know it's hard. It'll be crooked, but who cares? And we have a very special gift for you from the congregation and someone with a very big heart. It's a Kiddush cup that will now grace your table, I hope, on every Shabbat, and may you drink deeply from it and experience much sweetness and joy. And we say,
Mazel tov,
Simen tov and mazel tov and mazel tov and simen tov, simen tov and mazel tov and mazel tov and simen tov, simen tov and mazel tov and mazel tov and simen tov.
Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulecho Yisrael. Yehelanu, Ulecho Yisrael. Simin tov, mazel tov, simin tov, mazel tov, simin tov, mazel tov, simin tov, Yehelanu.
Don't sit down. We have Aleinu. I'll open the ark again.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, latet gedula liotze breshit, shelo asanu kigoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'goraleinu kechol hamonam, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
My thoughts now turn to all of those who have departed, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and our neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been righteous and a blessing to humanity. We mention by name Elizabeth King, the cousin of Barb Shepherd, and the 3 Israelis who passed away yesterday, Eitan Magini, Tomer Morad, Barak Lufin. We also acknowledge the yard sites of these for the next 2 weeks, since next week we'll be sitting at our Seder tables on Friday night. Sadie Arno, Albert Bernstein, Dina Citronbaum, Sidney Deutsch, Melvin Gergel, Herman Jaffe, Roxanne Jaffe, Nancy Lighthall, Billy London, Gussie Master, Milton Metzger, John Miller, George Packer, Hattie Perlman, George Sam Posner, Miriam Rubin, Nicholas Russolillo, Virginia Russolillo, Earl Schreier, Harry Shapiro, Louis Sobel, Jean Francis Tollefson, and David Winokur, and all of those lovingly remembered in the live stream chat. And are there additional names to add in memory at this time? If you are here remembering somebody or in mourning, I invite you to rise so that we might acknowledge you. And I invite the congregation to stand beside you in support as we all join together on page 294 with the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Olamei Maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Shmei D'Kudushat Brichu Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata Da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen.
Ve'imru, 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 amen. Ve'imru, 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 amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm Buffy Skolnick, representing our Board of Trustees tonight. Thanks to Kevin for his work on the stream. I'm really grateful that so many people came out to hear about Rabbi's experience in Poland, and we're still taking contributions. We have until next Friday, so anyone who feels moved after tonight's presentation, you can bring me a check or you can make an online donation. Hard Locks is literally around the corner, and I know that because I'm working on it 700 hours a day. With this being our largest fundraiser, we need everybody to do their part to make it a success. This year, with increased costs, we are spending between $40,000 and $50,000 to produce this festival. So we're asking for members to become Friends of Hard Locks. This is the program that's taking place of us asking you to sell all the raffle tickets. So if you are able, please do so as we near the festival in the next couple of weeks. Also, if you've signed up to volunteer for Hard Locks and your placement is related to food or beer, we are going to have a volunteer training on Wednesday, April 20th at 6 p.m. Everybody else will get information in their email if they have positions that are not food and beer. Sunday, April 24th, there'll be a somatic social justice workshop exploring a body-centered approach to white privilege and expanding resilience. There was a link and more information in your email this week, and there will be next Tuesday as well. Yom HaShoah will be observed on April 27th at CBI at 7 p.m. There'll be a prayer, song, and a lecture called Putin's Imaginary Nazis, the Weaponization of Holocaust Memory. If you don't know, the Brotherhood Brunch for Sunday had to be canceled to circumstances beyond our control, but there'll be some other stuff coming up later after Pesach. Our own egg tonight, as Rabbi said, is in honor of Bob and was brought together and coordinated by Wendy Boxer, Saul Perla, Ron Mannheimer, and Judy Levitt, and contributed to by many of Bob's beloved friends in our Torah group. So as a reminder, when we go in for Oneg, everybody hang out so we can do Kiddush and Motzi together, and please help Kent bus your own tables and clean up after yourselves. Thanks so much, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Remember that word chesed? Olam chesed yibaneh. That's the way the world is going to be built, with loving kindness. So please write us as we join in singing that we're going to build it, I'm going to build it, you're going to build it, and then we're going to bring God's world into this world. Sing it out.
Olam chesed yibaneh, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh, yadadai, Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed yibaneh, I will build this world from love. And you must build this world from love. And if we build this world from love, then God will build this world from love. Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed yibaneh,
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.